somebody who gets their ordination, their smicha, from a particular Rebbe. That Rebbe's word is law, not just from a religious perspective, but from an overarching social, political perspective. You don't oppose that person, not only because he was your teacher, you could respect your teacher, but as we know, going back to Talmudic times, there were times when teachers and students had arguments, they debated. In the modern sense of it, when you get your ordination from a school, you are a follower of that school. And both Musawi, who we killed and sent to a better place, and Nasrallah, who we haven't yet killed, but hopefully we will send them to a better place, are students of the Khomeini school. So when the supreme leader of Iran gives an order or puts forward an idea, it is followed not only as a political, he's the patron of a proxy politically, but he is the religious authority upon which they rest the foundation of their religious authority. Now, why is all this important? Because in most of the West, which does not understand any of this, and I hate to say it this way, the advisors, the analysts, the scholars, and the so-called know-it-alls believe that all this religious stuff really doesn't matter all that much. They're all pragmatists. The Iranians aren't such bad guys. All we need to do is go back and deal with them and an arrangement, give them the ability to sell some oil. After all, they're really just, capitalists in the end. They want to make some money, and that's all that interests them. And what I want to get across to you here is that the fundamental religious core of what they're doing is absolutely what drives them. And what's interesting about it to me as a social scientist is how constant it's been for a half a century, nearly half a century. It has shifted far, far, far less than the politics of the West. And we in the West believe that a little bit of pressure here, a carrot here and a stick over there, and everything can shift. These are people who think in eternal terms, in absolute terms, and in utterly constant terms. And it behooves us to try to understand them on their terms rather than try to impose ours on them. I'm going to stop here, give you an opportunity to ask questions. Feel free.
Elliot.
Yes, sir.
Thanks so much. Excellent talk. Fortunately, I don't have to correct you on too many things.
Thank you. I was worried.
No, that was really excellent. We have several questions already. I seem to have lost it, but I had a question from Mark. Yeah, from Mark Kahn. Mark says that the last time he saw you and heard you speak about the Arab countries and how they were not very well organized, have you seen any shift in that? Are the Arab countries, in the light of the tensions you point out, are they becoming more organized or not?
I don't think they're more organized, but I think they're focusing more on a single threat. In other words, let me see if I can describe this. There's an apparent organization. I'm not convinced that they are organizing between themselves, but the Iranian threat, which was exacerbated under the Obama administration's essentially making nice to Iran at the expense of the Arab countries, has got them to focus. Now, if you have a whole bunch of different people focusing on the same spot, they're going to come to similar conclusions even without organizing between them. So I think what we're seeing is more that than actual coordination. Although I don't rule out the fact that the Emiratis are speaking to the Omanis who are speaking to others, but I think that they're all coming to the same conclusion independently from the same point of focus, and that is when your imminent demise is threatened by the Shiite Persian murderous hordes, all of a sudden the Zionists don't look so bad, especially when the Zionists have F-35s and they know how to deliver. So
Right.
less organization and more sort of common focus.
Yes, thanks. I have a question from DJ Haley, who would like for you to say something about how different Islamic groups think about Jews. With all their differences, do they differ in how they regard Jews as well?
Okay, yes, for sure there are differences. And by the way, the term fundamentalist, I think, is a pretty useless term in this sense. Let me approach it this way, and I'll digress for a moment, but I'll come back on track very quickly. It's my belief determination that in scripture-based belief systems, and here I'm going to throw Judaism, Christianity, and Islam into the mix with all of the differences between Hebrew scripture, Christian scripture, and Quran. I'm not comparing them qualitatively, but in a scripture-based religion, I would argue that the commentary is more important than the text. In other words, I can take a text and with commentary, I can spin it this way and I can spin it that way, which is why I personally believe that those who try to find the roots of radical Islam in the Quran are superficially correct, but deeply wrong, because the problem is not the text, it's how it's being translated or commented on and extrapolated and so on. So there are those who read the Quranic texts and say, you know what? It says in the Quran that the land of Israel was given to the Jews. It says many positive things about the Jews in the Quran. It says many negative things about the Jews in the Quran. So there are those groups who follow, and they're not large. Again, today we're talking, I think, about a socio-political movement that is much more radical, anti-West, anti-Semitic, powerful in its own right. But to say that that is automatically, fundamentally Islam, I think is a mistake. And I'll give you one example that has less to do with the Jews, but more to do with sort of overall thought. There's a sect of Islam, the Ahmadi sect, that is completely anti-violent pacifist. Now, the only place they can live safely in the Middle East is Israel, because to be a pacifist Muslim anywhere in the Muslim world means they kill you. But they draw their theology from the same Quran that Al-Qaeda does, that Khomeini did, that Qutb did. How do you explain it? Well, we see it again among Jews, among Christians. It becomes a question of philosophy. So it's not universal, but today, for reasons that are far more extensive than I can go into here, the driving force in, I'll call it activist Islam, is anti-West and anti-Semitic.
Yeah. Thank you. We have a good question from Steve Ruback, who's asking about Russia. Which side are they on? What's their role? I mean, you mentioned the two empires, Persian and
Right.
Ottoman. There's another empire
Yes, for
mix,
sure.
and it's interesting how history is recycling here. What
Right.
about Russia?
Okay, so Russia is certainly interested in this region, but not in this, not on the same, I'll call it historical recidivist level as Turkey and Iran. Russia, here, let's be clear. The Russia of Putin is not the Soviet Union. The Russia of Putin is not ideological. It is cold, strategic, and I got to tell you this, and don't take it the wrong way. I like watching Putin operate as a strategist because the guy knows his business. Now, that doesn't mean I like him, but you know what? As a pro, it's nice to watch a pro operate. It's kind of like watching your team pick your sport, but watching your team get beaten, but the other team is pulling some really good plays, and you go, man, I hate you guys, but that was really impressive. Putin's interest in the Middle East is classical strategic. It's a whole lecture in and of itself why the Middle East is so important. But I'll just say briefly that the Russians' interest in the Mediterranean coast of Syria has to do with being able to gain access to the Atlantic because they need warm water ports, for those who are familiar with the terminology. That's why he went into Crimea, but the Black Sea is problematic because it empties out through Turkey. The truth is that with all of their duplicity, and to say that Putin is a liar is like redundancy. But with all of their duplicity, we can deal with the Russians because the Russians' interest in the Middle East doesn't ideologically or automatically negate Israel's interests. There's some overlap of conflict, if you will, but the Russians primarily are interested in their bases on the Mediterranean, and Israel doesn't really care about that. Our interest is keeping the Iranians away from our border, keeping them from supplying Hezbollah, and the Russians really don't care all that much about that either. So what I would say is that yes, the Russians are a player, but they're nowhere near the recidivist driving player of the Turks and the Iranians, who look upon this region as theirs. The Russians don't look upon it as theirs, they look upon it as useful. And there's a very important distinction between the two.
Yeah, good. Our next question, doesn't Iran have the largest Jewish population of any of the Muslim countries? There's a Jewish community there, right?
I would venture to guess yes, in part because the Jews refused to leave when Khomeini came to power. A lot of them sent their kids out, but they stayed. So there is, the answer is yes, and it's something of a hostage population. It's also a population that makes a very, very clear and vocal point of being supportive of the government, because the alternative could be very bloody. But the Jewish population is there not because it's a particularly welcoming place, but rather because there was a Jewish community there for millennia, essentially, and it refused to leave when Khomeini came to power, thinking that everything would be good, and now it's a little too late for them to get out.
Yes. Thank you. David Michelson wants to know, do you see a pathway to reduce tensions that is not evident or being considered or accepted by Western thinkers, statesmen, diplomats, policymakers? I mean,
Reduce tensions with Iran?
I think that's where the major tension is,
Okay.
right? And that's the
Um,
most dangerous tension, isn't it?
yes, and look,
Yeah,
the there are two approaches to international tension. I'm sorry, more than two. But let me start with the one that's prevalent in America, American academia, and today in American government, which is the liberal approach. And when I say liberal, I don't mean liberal versus conservative. I'm talking the international relations school of liberalism, not the political school of liberalism, which basically says nobody really wants conflict. Conflict is a result of miscommunication. And all we really need to do is sit down, have a cup of coffee, figure it out, work it out, and everything's going to be fine. That's exactly what Chamberlain believed about Hitler. And it's possible, but knowing what I know of the philosophy and ideology of the Iranian system, look, the Iranian parliament a couple of weeks ago passed a resolution demanding that the government annihilate Israel. So because Israel is a cancer in the Middle East that needs to be excised and annihilated. Now, I don't know about you people, but I don't have a lot to discuss about that.
right.
It's like I don't see the discourse. So when the reduction of tension, I think, can be looked upon on two levels, and I'm skeptical about both of them. We have reduced tension with Hezbollah along our border. We have reduced tension. We've threatened them and told them if they mess with us, we're going to blast them. So we have no tension. They are planning to annihilate us. No tension. I have a glass of wine. I'm not tense. We have F-35s. I'm not tense. But in other words, does the absence of tension mean the absence of conflict? Does it mean the absence of deep-rooted aspirations on one side versus the other to annihilate them? And that I don't believe that we're going to alleviate, because it is deep ideological, theological, political, its core, its essence. And David, you and I have had enough discussions on this, so and I know you and I agree on this. I don't bandy around the word Nazi freely. This is Nazi level animosity. And with Nazis, that yes, Chamberlain managed to alleviate tensions for, was it 4 months? By giving up Sudetenland.
Well, you mentioned Islamic government by Khomeini.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, as you recall, he says in that work that all of the honor and all of the glory that has ever come to Islam has come only through the sword.
Yes.
It's violence is embraced as a principle. Jihad means violence. Yeah. Anyway,
it's interesting. I was in a for sins committed in a previous life. I have to sit through some graduate courses in order to complete my PhD, and I was in a class this past week when they talked. The discussion was about the rationality of war and how war is always costly and therefore it should be considered to be irrational. But that's Western liberal thinking. It's not Eastern thinking. It's not Islamic thinking. It's not fascist thinking. And
right.
the scholars of Western academia, and I fair enough respect for their thought processes, are trying to universalize a very clear Western liberal idea and turn it into something that is a universal human idea, and it simply is not.
No, it's not. Well, with all that, Maxine Reiner wants to know, what is your advice for the Biden administration?
Wow. Give them my number and tell them I'll be happy to talk to them. Look, if we're talking about Iran, let me say something that may surprise you. I don't think that a deal with Iran is necessarily a bad idea. But I'm going to say this again, a deal, not the deal that was agreed to that's called the JCPOA. In other words, there are ways of coming to terms, not giving away too much. And I'm not going to go into details because details become what are they given, what are you given, and that sort of thing. But a deal in and of itself is not a bad idea. However, if what I'm reading is correct, and I can only go by what I'm reading, that the Biden administration's goal is to rejoin the JCPOA as it is, and then negotiate changes, then they should understand that they're dealing with people who have been negotiating in markets, the shuk, and selling carpets for 1,000 years. And the way to make a deal is not by going in and saying, first we'll agree with everything and then we'll negotiate. And I'm an honor graduate of the Don Vito Corleone School of Negotiating. And for those who are familiar and who read the book, not the movie, the Don goes in to negotiate to buy his godson's contract. And he offers the agent who owns the contract $10,000. And the agent turns it down. And he says, okay. Then he offers him $5,000. That's how you negotiate. You don't make a better offer when they turn it down. You make a worse offer. And I think that that's something that's completely lost on Western negotiating. And by the way, in the book, he says, when he did that, the agent realized that he was finished. And the next step was that the Godfather told him, look, either your brains or your signature are going to be on this contract in 1 minute. That's how you negotiate.
That's maybe the new administration will take that advice, and I don't know. Jerry would like your thoughts on the relationship between Hezbollah, the Iranians, and the Palestinians.
So here's another interesting anomaly, and again, let me go back to the Western and particularly American misconception that it's a Sunni Shiite divide. Iran and Hezbollah support Hamas, which is Sunni. They support Islamic Jihad, which is Sunni. They support Al-Qaeda, which is Sunni. In other words, the Sunni Shiite thing doesn't work as a means of assessing what's going on. The difference is that while Iran sees Hezbollah as their own, and not only because they're Shiites, but because they're Khomeinyists. Okay, and I'm gonna say that again. Yep. Iran sees Hezbollah as their own because they are Khomeinyists. Amal, which is a Shiite organization in Lebanon, is not seen by Iran as one of their own because they are not Khomeinyists. They support Hamas because Hamas does dirty work for them. They support Islamic Jihad because they do dirty work for them. Hamas is not opposed to Iran because, again, the Sunni Shiite thing is not the blood feud that the Western media and analysts make it out to be. But Iran will waste Hamas. Iran will waste Islamic Jihad. Iran will not waste Hezbollah. Because that's the difference between our own and our friends and associates. Hezbollah is their own. Hamas and Islamic Jihad, well, they're useful. But you know what? If they all get killed, so they'll be martyrs. They don't really care that much.
Thank you so much. I think we're nearing the end of our hour. Excellent talk, Elliot. This is an awesome way to begin the series. The series is being promoted as featuring world-class speakers, and I think you've demonstrated that from the get-go, both with your talk and the question and answer session. I'm sorry we didn't have time to get to, there are many more questions, but that's a sign of an excellent talk, that there's so many questions. So I just want to say thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We have our next speaker in 2 weeks, February 7th at 11:30 in the morning. It's Dr. Kenneth Price, who will discuss his new book, Separated Together, and there'll be more about that. So let me turn this back to the Rav for some closing remarks. And again, thank you. I'm even more in your debt. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And so in the past few weeks, whenever I announced the up-and-coming lecture series, I always ended with the words, you're in for a treat. So do yourselves a favor, do us a favor, and join us. And today, Elliot, I can say wholeheartedly that you truly treated us to this magnificent talk, insightful, enlightening, and for the very special person that you are. God bless you. Thank you so much. We truly appreciate you more than you'll ever know.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And as David just told you, that please join us on February the 7th for our next scholar, Dr. Ken Price, who will share with us his latest book, speak about his latest book. He is also a magnificent person and a wonderful friend of Nishmat Am, wonderful. Let me just say this, that we are exceedingly grateful to our dearest brother and member, the one and only Dr. David Patterson, who worked tirelessly to make sure that we have this amazing lineup of scholars. He is absolutely phenomenal. And David, we cannot thank you enough. We cannot thank you enough for making this possible, and for all the other people, and to all the other people who work. I call them the Hineni people. They always step up to the plate and they say, Hineni, here I am. What can I do? How can I help? And this is the type and the kind of congregation that we at Nishmat Am have. And we thank God and we thank you for it. We thank you for it. So thanks again, David, for making this possible, for making this wonderful lineup possible. I know that in closing, let me just say this, that even during this pandemic, we at Nishmat Am made sure to bring to you lectures via Zoom, of course, lectures, services, lunch and learns, speakers from throughout the world. And if your heart moves you, please consider making a contribution to our synagogue, to Nishmat Am, so we can continue in our holy work, in our Avodat HaKodesh, and continue to do what we do. And to bring you the finest in everything that we have to offer. On your screen, you have the contact on your contact. So please contact us. Contact us. As I said, you know, that even during this pandemic, we still did everything in our power to make sure that we bring you the finest of the finest, and we did, and we'll continue to do this. So please, if your heart moves you again, please consider making a contribution so we can continue in this sacred work. Also, if you'd like to be included in our email, please also let us know, contact us, and we will include you in our email. At the end, let me just say a hearty yeshkuach to all of you. All of you made this possible. All of you worked so hard and making sure that Nishmat Am is doing well. To David, to Jerry, to Stanley Siegel, of course, and to everyone else, to our president, all of our members. God bless you all. And I'll see you, God willing, February the 7th. However, this coming Tuesday night, we have Pirkei Avot, and Friday we have Friday services. Tomorrow night we have our Edel B'nai Mitzvah. So you see, we keep on moving. God bless you all.
Pleasure. Thank you. All blessings. Thank you, Elliot.
Thank you.
Thank you,
My
Elliot.
pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thank you. Stan, thank you.